Hey guys, tonight we drift into the glittering yet grimy heart of the Balkans, where the city of Sarajevo hums like a half-forgotten jazz tune, lit by broken neon and whispered promises. Picture it. Dusk slides down the buildings like old velvet, and a boy named Naser Kelmendi is watching the taxis from his window, wondering which one holds the kind of man he wants to be. His building is cracked, the wallpaper peeled back in strips like old skin, but he keeps his shoes clean and his dreams even cleaner. There's a buzz in the streets, people rushing, deals hushed, history being rewritten after every news bulletin. You can almost smell the tension, equal parts damp stone and cigarette ash. Born into a working-class Kosovo-Albanian family, young Naser already knows that luck isn't waiting to meet him. He'll have to steal it. And like many in the post-Yugoslav wastelands, he learns early that rules are for someone else. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up right now, where are you listening from? Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Naser doesn't start with a gun or a gang. No, his first weapon is observation. He spends his afternoons outside the Sarajevo market, watching men who don't speak loudly, but somehow have the best cars. The same men who eat slow, talk even slower, and wear gold watches hidden under plain sleeves. He notices one detail. None of them rush. Even when someone's yelling at a vendor, these men float past like they're too expensive to hear shouting. Naser begins mimicking that energy. Stillness as currency. In the evenings, while his brothers argue over dinner, he steps outside, memorizing faces and license plates. There's a lot of talk about relatives in Germany or someone in Tirana who can get you things. Naser listens. He files every name, every soft threat, every price of gasoline, every rumor about who slapped whom at which checkpoint. One night, a black Mercedes pulls up and idles just beneath his apartment. He sees a man get out, hand something small to another man. Maybe a passport, maybe not. And here's only this: tomorrow, same place. If you're late, don't come. It's a moment so quiet you could miss it. But Naser doesn't. And he'll replay that phrase for the next 10 years as if it were scripture. He's not in school much longer. He drops out with the excuse that he wants to help the family, but really, he's got other classrooms in mind. Gas stations where you can trade more than petrol. Hotels with more guards than guests. Border cafes where people just happen to leave bags behind. At 15, he takes a job hauling crates for a warehouse on the outskirts. He quickly realizes half of what goes in isn't recorded on paper. Bottles with no label, boxes marked flour that weigh twice what they should. One day, the foreman pulls him aside. "You didn't see anything today, right?" Naser simply nods. That nod will open more doors than any smile ever could. By the time he's 17, he's running errands that pay 10 times what a legitimate job would. One week, it's escorting a man across the border. The next, it's delivering a suitcase to a man in a cheap suit with very clean fingernails. There's a moment when most teenagers dream of fast cars and loud music. Naser dreams of silence, long corridors, closed doors, and the sound of envelopes being slid across glass tables. In the wider world, things are fraying. Tito's death in 1980 fractures the uneasy federation that held the Balkans together. Nationalist tensions bubble just beneath the surface. But to Naser, these are just winds pushing the boat faster. A historical fact. By the late 80s, smuggling becomes a booming shadow economy in Yugoslavia. With sanctions, corruption, and fractured law enforcement, underground logistics men like Naser become indispensable. He starts organizing his own routes. Cigarettes first, always a crowd pleaser. Then fabrics, shoes, and sometimes even TVs. His genius is subtle. He never carries the product himself, never uses the same person twice, and always changes the pickup point. But here's the thing. He doesn't want to be a gangster. Not exactly. He wants to be seen like a businessman. Crisp shirts, good cologne, no shouting, just receipts. Many people still think that Naser was just a lucky opportunist, a man in the right place at the wrong time. But what if it wasn't luck? What if it was deliberate, precise, and terrifyingly patient? So what do you think? Was he made by the chaos, or did he make himself from it? One night in 1989, Naser walks into a small casino in Belgrade, pretending to be older than he is. The lights buzz, the machines blink like they're trying to stay awake. And in that moment, watching a man lose everything in 5 minutes, Naser Kelmendi falls in love, not with gambling, but with control. The next morning, Naser can't stop replaying the scene. Cards folding, chips clinking, the low hum of men pretending they aren't losing. He walks the streets of Belgrade like they're a living spreadsheet, calculating which shops deal in cash, which casinos change bills quietly, and which hotels never ask too many questions. Back in Sarajevo, he's different now. It's subtle. He adjusts his tie slower, speaks with longer pauses, and never interrupts. That casino wasn't a fluke. It was a blueprint. Cigarette smuggling becomes his backbone. It's simple, profitable, and addictive, not unlike the cigarettes themselves. A mainstream fact. In the early 90s, Western brands like Marlboro and Camel are harder to find in the Balkans than military uniforms. Naser rides that scarcity like a seasoned surfer. He builds a micro-empire, organizing young kids to run cartons across towns on bicycles, stashing goods inside bus seats, car bumpers, even religious procession carts. It's a smuggler's dream. The authorities are underpaid, the borders are loose, and almost everyone wants in. He starts using coded language. Bananas means boots. Snowflakes means cigarettes. Velvet means American. The more absurd the code, the safer the deal. Do you remember the first time he got paid in Deutschmarks instead of dinars? He does. He didn't spend a single note. He framed one, hid the rest. That little pile under his mattress became sacred. Then come the lessons from men you wouldn't meet in daylight. There's Rocco, the ex-freedom fighter with a glass eye and a soft spot for ancient Roman poetry. And Jelko, who once killed a man over a chess match. Allegedly. They don't teach him how to shoot. They teach him when not to. Never show force first, Rocco says one night, sipping rakija. Let them beg for it. Let them think it's the only language you understand. Naser listens, absorbs, applies. He learns how to leave no paper trail. How to disappear a license plate. How to make 2 cell phones talk without ever connecting. One detail at a time, he becomes a creature of efficiency wrapped in mildness. Evenings become his prime hours. He often walks to the edge of the Miljacka River, lighting a cigarette he doesn't smoke, thinking, always thinking. He starts buying favors. The mechanic who can tamper with car VINs, the bakery girl who hears things at 5 a.m., the notary with a gambling problem and loose morals, and still, always, the casinos. He visits them like churches, not to play, but to watch. He sees how people walk when they lie, how men scratch their ear when they bluff. He memorizes rituals. Soon, He's laundering small money through those same casinos. Just a few hundred at first, then a few thousand, and he makes sure it looks clumsy, on purpose. He loses on purpose, leaves early, wears scuffed shoes, all part of the camouflage. But something shifts when a man named Victor pulls up in a BMW and offers him a crate of bootleg perfume, real French knockoffs. Victor wants to move them across 4 provinces. Naser doesn't flinch. He studies the crate, smells the air, and asks only one thing. "How many men do you trust with this besides me?" Victor answers, "None." And just like that, Naser isn't hauling anymore. He's orchestrating. His home becomes a revolving door of visitors. Some bring nothing but a story. Others bring knives in their boots. But all leave with the sense that Naser knows something they don't. And he does. A younger cousin once asked, "What's your job exactly?" And Naser answered, "I solve delays." The boy blinked, confused. And that's how he knew the kid was safe. Anyone who understands that sentence is already in too deep. He upgrades his wardrobe. Suits stitched in secret. Shoes with hollow soles. A watch gifted by a man who swore he'd never forget Naser, then promptly disappeared. He builds a reputation not on brutality, but on punctuality. If Naser says 2 p.m., it's done by 1:50. In a region drunk on chaos, punctuality is revolutionary. Many people still think that his rise was accidental, that he just filled a vacuum during wartime. But what if it wasn't the war that made him rich? What if he'd have done it anyway? War or no war, just slower, quieter, silkier. So what do you think? Did the conflict just make his success louder? Or was it always inevitable? The first real cartel meeting happens in a restaurant with terrible food, but no windows. Naser listens more than he speaks. When someone suggests moving heroin across the Montenegro border, he asks one question: "Have you ever watched a dog bury a bone?" That's how we bury product. No one laughs, but everyone remembers. That night, he walks home under cold drizzle. A passing tram screeches in the distance. His phone buzzes once, a single word. Approved. He smiles, not because of what's been approved, but because it means someone else finally understands his language. The first time Naser lays eyes on the man they call the Owl, it's in the unlit corner of a roadside diner near Banja Luka. The Owl isn't remarkable. Slender, pale, voice like wet sand, but his Rolodex could collapse a government. He's a logistics genius who never smiles, and that alone makes Naser curious. They sit across from each other, 2 mugs of black coffee between them, neither touched. The Owl leans forward and says, "There's a shipment of Czech pharmaceuticals that need to get lost before sunrise." Naser doesn't ask why. He only asks, "Where do you want them to be found?" The Owl pauses, blinks. Then he says, "You learn quick." From that night on, Naser learns faster than anyone expects. Every smuggling job teaches him more about the real map, the one layered beneath the official geography. Roads not shown on GPS, tunnels cut through forgotten hillsides, petrol stations where the gas is a front for data drops. By his early 20s, Naser isn't just in the game. He's tailoring the rules. His competitors traffic goods. He traffics confidence. Historical fact. During the Balkan conflicts of the 1990s, the black market economy ballooned. By some estimates, it became larger than the legal one. While nations fractured, smugglers stitched invisible threads across them. Naser was one of the most skilled weavers. In a dusty warehouse outside Novi Pazar, Naser watches as his men carefully load 20 crates labeled as machine parts. Inside, Italian jeans, French cologne, boxes of antibiotics, and somewhere between them all, one velvet pouch holding 20,000 Deutschmarks. He doesn't flinch when a man with a gold tooth arrives late and starts apologizing. "You've got 5 minutes," Naser says softly. "Until what?" the man asks. "Until you're someone else's problem." The man makes it in 3. That's the difference with Naser. He doesn't yell. He simply defines gravity, and the rest falls into place. His friends, if you could call them that, begin to call him Shkelkimi, the shine. Not because he flaunts his wealth, but because you can see the light bend when he walks into a room. He still spends hours watching people gamble. At one casino in Tuzla, he notices a dealer's hand tremble just slightly when slipping a card. That dealer disappears by morning. But Naser, he buys the casino 2 months later. You'd think he would show it off, but no. He keeps the signage ugly, the carpet tacky, the drinks watered down. It's all part of the illusion. Only the vault room is exquisite. Marble floor, low light, soundproofed walls, and one steel table with velvet edges. And yet, despite all the movement, Naser remains invisible in public. No press, no flamboyant photos, just rumors. Some say he once bribed a border guard with a single smile. Others say he can cross 4 countries in an afternoon without opening his passport. There's one night, under heavy snow, when his car skids near the Kosovo border. A patrol stops him. They check the trunk. Blankets, food, cigarettes, nothing illegal. "You're heading out late," the officer says. Naser just shrugs. Some men sleep better knowing things are in motion. The officer lets him pass. That was the beginning of what many believe was his quiet conquest of northern Kosovo. He never fires a shot. He just keeps promises. Many people still think that smuggling is brute work. Fast cars, quick cash, shaky alliances. But Naser disagrees. To him, it's architecture. Every favor a beam, every threat a hinge. So what do you think? Was he a criminal, or just the best logistics manager the Balkans ever saw? His network becomes deeper. He starts hiring translators, not thugs, accountants, not muscle, and yes, a few muscle too, but ones that wear suits and listen more than they talk. He begins to insist on one rule: no violence in front of family. It sounds noble, but it's practical. People with children have more to lose and more to offer. There's a warehouse in Skopje where he meets a man who speaks 6 languages and carries a briefcase with nothing but SIM cards. They shake hands. Nothing is signed. But within weeks, 3 different Balkan routes become Naser's alone. Do you remember that first crate of cigarettes? That childish hustle? Now he's moving people. Guns, currency. But through it all, he still goes back to the casinos, always watching. At one, a woman with chipped red nails calls him a ghost with perfect posture. She's not wrong. One night in Sarajevo, after a quiet meeting in a hotel room where the curtains are drawn and the phone has no dial tone, Naser leans out on the balcony. Snowflakes fall like old secrets. He lights a cigarette, not because he needs one, but because someone's watching, and he knows it. He smiles, just a little, and then disappears inside. The first time Naser walks into the new casino in Belgrade, he does so with the casual grace of a man returning to a home he never built but always owned. The floors are sticky, the lights too bright, the machines too loud, but he sees potential buried beneath all that noise. He's not here to gamble. He's here to launder, to polish dirty money until it glows like it came straight from a grandmother's purse. The casino's owner is a man named Peter, who wears cologne that arrives before he does. Peter thinks Naser is just another investor, until the second meeting, when Naser casually mentions the serial number of a faulty roulette wheel. Petar stops smiling. That's how Naser gets a 40% stake. No signature, no contract. Just one broken wheel and a man who knows when he's been seen. Over the next months, Naser pours money into renovations, but not where you'd expect. The main floor remains as ugly as ever, but the back room, the real back room, is a marvel. Soundproofed, mirrored, with a bar that serves nothing but silence and single malt. From there, he begins to host his own kind of gambling, risk scaled and priced. One night it's deciding how many trucks can cross the Bosnian border without paperwork. The next, it's whether a local mayor will stay bought through election season. He doesn't always win, but he never loses big. Historical fact. After the wars of the 90s, many Balkan countries underwent rapid privatization. Former state-owned enterprises, including hotels and entertainment venues, were snapped up by entrepreneurs with deep pockets and shallow pasts. Naser is one of those quiet buyers. He rarely signs anything himself. He uses proxies, doormen, nephews, even a retired geography teacher who suddenly finds himself co-owner of 3 seaside clubs. He starts dressing the part. Tailored suits, never too loud, rings that don't sparkle, a watch that tells more than time. It tells that he doesn't wait for you. And yet, when you meet him, he greets you like an old friend. Never first names. Always brother. Always a half smile, like he'd just heard the punchline to a joke you didn't know you told. Do you remember his rule about punctuality? He begins applying it to his entire network. If you're 5 minutes late, you don't get a second chance. Not because he's cruel, because you've told him everything he needs to know. His brothers join the operation now. One handles logistics in Kosovo. Another manages a freight company in Montenegro. A third, more unstable, is assigned to public relations, which mostly means keeping journalists occupied with small scandals while the real business happens behind velvet ropes. Family dinners become strategic briefings, each plate served with a side of whispered updates, but the smiles are forced. Naser can sense it. His youngest brother, Arben, once a bright-eyed teenager who used to call him the magician, now avoids eye contact. One night, Arben confronts him. Says the casino's attracting the wrong kind of attention. Says they should go legit. Naser doesn't raise his voice. He simply says, "Do you know what a clean business is, Arben? It's just a dirty one that no one's watching yet." And then, almost softly, "You can leave any time, but the money won't follow." Arben stays, but the look in his eyes doesn't. Many people still think that Naser's casinos were all about drugs and money laundering. But others believe they were more places to meet, exchange coded glances, and reshape the Balkan map in real time. So what do you think? Were they dens of vice? Or boardrooms in disguise? One Tuesday evening, Naser sits at a poker table with 3 men and a translator. None of them speak the same language, but by the end of the night, a shipping route between Istanbul and Sarajevo has been drawn up. In scribbles on a cocktail napkin, he folds every hand, but wins the night. That's the trick. In a place built on illusion, Naser brings reality, quietly, relentlessly. He starts investing in art, not because he likes it, but because art speaks in prices only the wealthy understand. A forged Kandinsky here, a real Matisse there, all part of the camouflage. He even begins holding charity galas. For the children, the banners say, and they do help children, just not always the kind you think. Some carry briefcases, some carry guns, all carry loyalty. At one gala, a state prosecutor's wife leans in and whispers, "Are you really as dangerous as they say?" Naser smiles and replies, "Only if you're on time." She laughs, but she doesn't sleep that night. Late one evening, He walks through the casino's private hallway, checking doors. Behind one, 2 men count bills. Behind another, a woman whispers coordinates into a phone. And in the last room, his favorite. A single chair sits beneath a chandelier, and the walls are covered in velvet so thick, sound dies before it reaches the corners. This is where he thinks. Not in terms of days, but decades. And he's just getting started. The first time Naser walks into a city council chamber without an appointment, no one questions him. The receptionist instinctively looks down. The guards shuffle aside like furniture being moved by an invisible hand. He's not there to make demands. He's there to offer solutions. The mayor, sweating into his collar, barely manages a good evening before Naser lays a folded envelope on the table. It's not money. It's something far more persuasive. A list of permits, already approved and stamped, that haven't yet been applied for. Think of it as a suggestion box, Naser says, voice soft as snowfall. By now, he's perfected the look. Clean lines, dark wool coat, collar never raised, always tailored. He doesn't wear sunglasses indoors like the amateurs. His eyes do the work. He's expanding faster than anyone expects. The casino is just the beginning. Soon he's dabbling in real estate, freight, hospitality. On paper, he's a businessman. On whispered lips, he's a problem that doesn't complain. It resolves, but it's his charm that makes him dangerous. He compliments waiters, tips exact change, tells jokes that are never too funny, just enough to lower shoulders. Historical fact. After the collapse of Yugoslavia, local economies became tangled in informal networks of influence, often led by businessmen who blurred the lines between legal and illegal with surgical precision. Naser doesn't blur them. He erases them. There's a hotel near Lake Skadar, half Montenegrin, half allegory. Officially, it's owned by a consortium of investors from Vienna. In reality, every door in the place opens for him. Its basement houses what the newspapers would later call a conference space. Inside, marble floors and no windows. At the center, a table large enough to seat 12, but rarely does. Most meetings are between 3 men and one agenda. It's in this room that Naser begins negotiating not with smugglers, but with politicians. He learns their weaknesses quickly. One wants a scholarship for his son. Another wants a villa in Dubrovnik that no one can trace. A third simply wants his mistress to stop calling him during meetings. Naser never judges. He simply delivers. He also starts playing a longer game. Instead of bribes, he offers favors. One call here, one contract there. Soon, officials find themselves dependent, not owned, indebted. Many people still think Naser bought people with cash, but those who knew him say otherwise. He bought them with peace. So what do you think? Was he a crook buying influence, or a statesman without a state? At home, his sons begin to notice. The eldest, Elvis, starts asking questions. He wants to help, but also to understand. What happens if they stop needing you? He asks one evening. Naser lights a cigarette slowly, thinks a long time, then says, "Then I find someone else who does. It's not a threat. It's a principle." He starts grooming Elvis. Not like a gangster, but like a diplomat. Lessons in posture, tempo, how to read a room by the way people cross their legs. But Elvis resists. He wears jeans to meetings. He interrupts. Worst of all, he argues, one night, after a poorly handled negotiation with a freight company, Naser takes him to the river. No bodyguards, no words, just silence and the sound of water curling around stones. Power, Naser finally says, isn't taken, it's absorbed. He lets that hang in the cold air. Elvis says nothing. And that's the moment Naser knows his son isn't ready. Not yet. Still, He gives him the casino to manage, on paper at least. Let him fail quietly. Let him learn without headlines. Meanwhile, Naser's empire stretches across the Adriatic. One of his men opens a port warehouse in Durrës. Another buys up a fleet of delivery vans that never deliver anything but envelopes and silence. But with expansion comes enemies. Interpol starts whispering. Montenegrin intelligence leaks his name during a corruption inquiry. A journalist prints a piece titled "The Dawn of Decadence." And for the first time, Naser's name leaves a paper trail. He doesn't panic. He adapts. He begins using proxies for everything. His phone is answered by 3 different voices, each claiming to be him. His cars rotate like clock hands. His meetings move from hotels to backrooms to boats docked on quiet lakes. One meeting takes place entirely in gestures. 2 men, 1 cigar, no words. The deal? A trucking line from Istanbul to Vienna. Naser seals it by flicking ash into an empty glass. An agreed-upon signal meaning no police risk. At a dinner in Skopje, an American consultant sits next to him and asks, "How do you sleep at night?" Naser smiles, with one eye open and a glass of water nearby. The man laughs, but checks out of the hotel before dawn. Even Naser's enemies start to admire him. He never curses, one rival says. That's how you know he's serious. And always, behind it all, the casino pulses like a quiet heartbeat. Do you remember the first time he lost money on purpose? He still does. It bought him trust that no bribe ever could. Now, when he walks through the floor, dealers straighten their vests. Players glance sideways. A man at the corner machine swallows hard before hitting spin. Naser says nothing, just watches. Because watching is how he wins. If you want to know what kind of man Naser is, you should have been there the night he showed up to a business negotiation with no papers, no guards, just a slice of cake from a bakery no longer in business. The man across from him, a Bosnian logistics mogul with a fondness for sweets and a reputation for betrayal, didn't know whether to be flattered or terrified. Naser simply placed the plate on the table and said, "They say memory lives in taste. Let's remember we're friends." And the deal, surprisingly, went through. No shouting, no threats, just sponge cake and stillness. That's how it works with Naser. Where others bring force, he brings familiarity. You'll barely notice your loyalty shifting until one day you're arguing in his favor without remembering why. At this point, his logistics web spans 6 countries: Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro, Bosnia, North Macedonia, and Turkey. Each one stitched into the other with the precision of a tailor. He buys gas stations along mountain roads, not for fuel, but for visibility. A man who owns the roads owns the silence around them. Historical fact. In the early 2000s, cross-border smuggling between the Balkans and Turkey surged, especially in narcotics and counterfeit goods. It was a time when customs officers were either overwhelmed or underfunded. Ideal conditions for an empire like Naser's. He builds what insiders start calling the corridor. Trucks drive at odd hours. Drivers are rotated weekly. GPS gets scrambled twice per trip. But the beauty lies in the mundane. The trucks are dirty. The paperwork boring. Nothing flashy. Nothing to raise eyebrows. And that's the point. Naser doesn't want to impress. He wants to disappear into the system. He begins working with Turkish partners. Sharp suits, slicker smiles, and a taste for luxury yachts. At first, they test him. Offer bribes instead of deals. Show off expensive watches like they're passes to a club. Naser, unfazed, offers them hot tea instead. When they don't drink it, he ends the meeting. The ones who drink stay. The ones who don't, he never calls again. At a villa outside Istanbul, a senior Turkish fixer tells him, "You're the quietest man I've ever feared." Naser just smiles and replies, That's because I don't talk unless I have to lie. It's during these years he starts to refine his operation into something almost surgical. No more chaotic deals, no more unnecessary partners. Everything flows through 3 filters: predictability, silence, and gratitude. Predictability, because he needs his partners to know he'll never surprise them, unless it's necessary. Silence, because every word spoken aloud carries risk. And gratitude, because loyalty earned through debt is weaker than loyalty earned through relief. Many people still think that Naser ruled through fear, but the truth may be gentler and far more dangerous. He ruled through comfort. So what do you think? Was he a tyrant in disguise, or just the most dependable man in an undependable world? Do you remember Arbin, his youngest brother, with too many questions? By now, Arbin has vanished from the front lines. Some say he moved to Vienna. Others say he was retired by Naser himself. Whatever the truth, Naser never speaks his name again. It's as if the boy became a shadow too long to step over. In Sarajevo, he purchases the Grand Hotel Europa. Not officially, of course. It's done through shell companies and borrowed names. But make no mistake, when Naser walks through the revolving door, every bellhop straightens their spine. The hotel becomes more than lodging. It's a message. The velvet curtains, the piano in the corner that no one plays, the doorman who knows 7 languages. It all whispers the same thing: stability. And in a city that's seen more shells than shell suits, stability is priceless. He installs a private elevator that doesn't appear on the main directory. It leads to a suite without a number. Inside, glass tables, muted lighting, and an air filter so strong you can taste the absence of dust. That's where meetings happen now. No more back alleys. No more warehouse offices. If you want to see Naser, you come to the suite. You enter clean, speak soft, and leave quieter. Every Sunday, the same ritual plays out. A delivery of 3 newspapers, none from Sarajevo, a plate of figs, 1 espresso, and an hour of staring out the window at a city he helped shape but never claimed. He starts keeping a notebook, not names. He's too careful for that. Just moments. A smile that lingered too long. A handshake too firm. A glance exchanged when none were needed. These aren't memories. They're leverage, waiting to mature. Interpol, meanwhile, keeps circling. He knows his name is on whiteboards in Brussels. He even jokes about it at dinners. If they spelled it right, I'd be flattered. But behind the joke is preparation. His legal team is assembled like a war cabinet. Not just lawyers, linguists, archivists, retired judges. They don't defend him. They delay. There's a difference. The trucks keep moving. The corridors stay open. And the velvet doors of the Grand Hotel Europa whisper shut behind men who wear their nerves like cologne. But beneath the surface of polished corridors and brushed steel elevators, there's a subtle shift. Something's tightening. The newspapers, still delivered in triplicate each Sunday, begin to mention his name more often. Always in passing, always with alleged draped over it like a diplomatic scarf. Interpol puts out feelers, asset lists, company ties, movement patterns. But every time a case builds, it collapses under its own paperwork. Because Naser doesn't own anything, at least not directly. Everything's been scrubbed, wrapped in offshore fog and layered with deniability. Historical fact. Between 2005 and 2010, Balkan organized crime saw an increase in transnational cases, but convictions remained notoriously difficult. Language barriers, weak witness protection, and shifting alliances made prosecution more like chess than law. And Naser, he was already 10 moves ahead. He rotates his legal residence between 3 cities: Sarajevo, Pristina, and Budva. Always within reach of a lawyer, a passport, and an alternate version of the truth, his empire, meanwhile, grows more elegant. He shuts down operations that are too loud, sells a nightclub in Tirana, burns a trucking route in Skopje that's been compromised. But one line he doesn't touch, the Albanian pipeline. It's not a single road or product. It's a method, a way of using small border towns, unpaved roads, family networks, and unregistered vehicles to move absolutely anything. And it's run by men who fear boredom more than prison. Naser meets them not in casinos or hotels, but in cafes with cracked walls and sugar cubes wrapped in wax paper. They speak in gesture, half in dialect, half in metaphor. One of them, a man named Drayton, tells him, "We don't need passports. We have mothers in every village." Naser nods. He understands. Blood is borderless here. And yet, he's cautious. He doesn't allow full integration. He creates buffer zones, middlemen with no loyalty, just invoices. If one link breaks, the rest can keep spinning. He tells his courier manager, "Think of it like a clock. If one cog stops, the time shouldn't." Many people still think that Naser's genius was his network, but others insist it was his patience, his ability to not act when everyone else would. So what do you think? Was it his speed that made him dangerous, or his restraint? At home, the tension with his son Elvis grows. Elvis is older now, sharper. He started wearing tailored suits too, but with louder patterns. He wants to expand into new territory. Online gambling, crypto wallets, darknet marketplaces. Naser listens quietly, then says, "You want to move fast because you're scared of being still." Elvis doesn't argue, but his jaw tightens. The conversation ends, but the silence afterward grows a heartbeat. Elvis begins pushing deals without his father's consent. One shipment ends up missing. Another partner in Belgrade doesn't get paid. A meeting is missed. Naser doesn't shout. He simply tells his most trusted driver, "Take him out of circulation, somewhere warm, somewhere poor." Elvis is flown to Cyprus. No warning, no luggage, just a note. "You'll thank me later." 3 weeks pass before he calls. "I understand now," he says. "You always did," Naser replies, then hangs up. That's how he keeps control, not with chains, but with echoes. Meanwhile, he begins working with a Turkish syndicate tied to textiles. But the deal is strange, too clean, too eager. He investigates, finds a backdoor plan to double-dip the customs route through Bulgaria. Not a threat, but a sign of carelessness. He cancels the deal quietly. The contact disappears from Istanbul's skyline like a light turned off. Do you remember the first man Naser ever watched fold under pressure? He still compares every opponent to that moment. The lip quiver, the hand twitch, the broken rhythm in breath, and none of them match it. Yet, he attends fewer meetings now. Appears only when it matters. The less he shows up, the more people remember him. One evening, he visits a border outpost near Kukes. Nothing special. Just one guard shack, one radio, and 3 trucks idling in the dark. The officer salutes, nervous, offers him tea. Naser declines, then asks, "Do you think borders are real?" The officer pauses, then stammers something about sovereignty. Naser nods slowly. Good. Then keep believing that. He leaves without another word. The trucks follow. Many believe this was his way of testing not loyalty, but imagination, because to Naser, the borders were never obstacles. They were illusions. Paper fences for paper men, and as long as you believed in them, you'd never see him coming. They start calling him the clockmaker. Not in newspapers, not officially, but among men who move freight without questions, and politicians who accept favors instead of arguments. Because everything he touches runs on time. Naser's empire no longer looks like a criminal enterprise. On paper, it resembles a loosely affiliated group of international businesses. But beneath the invoices and customs codes are codes of silence, of consequence, of memory. And nowhere does that memory weigh heavier than in Montenegro. There, nestled between coastline and mountains, is a sleepy village where he keeps a private estate. Locals know it only as the White House with no mailbox. No one dares approach, but everyone knows when he's in town. The air changes. Dogs bark less. Shops stay open a little later. One evening, Naser hosts a meeting with a Balkan telecom executive and 2 Turkish investors. The villa's library smells like old wood and heavy paper. No one touches the wine. They talk in abstraction, cell towers, offshore signal rerouting, SMS laundering. One of the Turkish men laughs, calls it the future. Naser doesn't laugh. He simply says, "The future is just the past," cleverly renamed. The deal is made in principle, but only after Naser receives a nod from a silent man standing near the window. No one asks who he is. Historical fact. By the mid-2000s, organized crime in the Balkans increasingly moved into white-collar territory. Telecom fraud, VAT scams, cyber laundering. Countries like Montenegro and Albania were flagged by international watchdogs for their role in facilitating such flows. Naser didn't just ride that wave. He helped shape the current. He creates 3 new shell companies, one in Panama, one in Serbia, one in Dubai. Each shares a similar name, slight enough to confuse. Through them, funds pass like whispers and disappear like vapor. His operation becomes so clean, even the IRS would applaud the formatting. And yet, his face never appears in photos. Not on websites, not on magazine covers. In a world obsessed with visibility, he cultivates absence. That absence becomes a legend. Many people still think Naser was just another smuggler turned mob boss. But others, especially those in finance, describe him as an architect of voids. So what do you think? Was he a man or a system in human form? He begins spending more time at the Grand Hotel Europa again, but only at night. A side elevator takes him straight to the suite with no number. The windows are shaded. The air is cold. Each visit is the same. He sits at the small desk near the corner, lights a single candle, opens a plain leather notebook. He doesn't write, he just reads. Notes, observations, details. One evening while reading, the lights flicker. Not an outage, just a hiccup. He presses a button beneath the desk. A bellhop appears, nods, leaves. 15 minutes later, the city's electrical grid is being inspected. It wasn't paranoia, it was procedure, because Naser knows. When things begin to flicker, someone's testing shadows. Do you remember the first time he said no to a bribe? He still remembers the way the man blinked, like a bird flying into glass. That refusal bought him something even rarer than money, credibility. At a shipping expo in Vienna, Naser sends an envoy, not himself. The man delivers a speech about Balkan logistics innovation. Audience applauds. The man bows. But the real speech, the one that matters, is a 2-minute conversation in the lobby where a Dutch executive hands over a flash drive wrapped in tissue. Inside, a port schedule and 5 passwords. The next day, 4 cargo containers from Istanbul go missing. They reappear 3 weeks later in Hamburg, loaded with electronics, pristine customs forms, and an untraceable bonus, 300,000 euros in pure lithium batteries. No one asks questions. By now, even governments are playing along. Naser doesn't push, he nudges. A contract here, a donation there. A cousin suddenly gets a visa. He plays the long game, the slow game. Many people still think he was a gambler, but he wasn't. He was the house. So, what do you think? Was he lucky, or was luck just another client? Back home, Elvis returns from Cyprus, thinner, quieter, eyes like a man who's read every page in a book he wasn't meant to open. Naser welcomes him with a nod, not a hug. They sit in silence. Then Naser says, "I want you to manage the Belgrade casino again." Elvis nods, says nothing. That's how you know the lesson worked, because Naser's rules are simple. Never explain power, just make people feel it. The diamonds arrive in a duffel bag. No locks, no labels, just 37 velvet pouches and one handwritten inventory list that Naser never reads. They're fake, of course, but that's the point. He meets the courier in a garage below a butcher shop in Pristina. The place smells like iron and dust. The courier's sweating, nervous, apologizing for being late. "You're not late," Naser says. "You're just no longer early." He takes the bag without another word and disappears into the quiet corridor behind a cold room. These aren't the kind of diamonds that sparkle. They're the kind that buy you just enough time to escape a border search. Because in the Balkans, perception moves faster than proof. And Naser's made a fortune out of misdirection. Historical fact. In the mid-2000s, synthetic gem smuggling spiked across the Balkans. Counterfeit diamonds, used as placeholders, bribes, and laundering tools, became a favorite among organized networks looking to mimic high-value deals without risking traceable cash. Naser doesn't need them to fool buyers. He needs them to fool systems. A customs officer in Podgorica once opens one of his crates and finds only electrical parts, cables, and 2 pouches of low-grade gems. He lets the truck pass. Why? Because only the honest smugglers leave diamonds in plain sight. Back in Sarajevo, the Grand Hotel Europa is undergoing renovations. Naser has ordered that the carpets in the upper suites be replaced, not because they're worn, but because the fibers leave behind trace elements detectable by UV scans. It's a detail most people wouldn't consider, but Naser considers everything. He's begun sleeping less. Not from fear, but from velocity. His empire now includes pieces of places most people haven't heard of. A storage unit in Marseille, a textile front in Bursa, a document services kiosk in Skopje where, for a fee, you can become almost anyone. And then there's the vault. Do you remember the marble-lined back room in the Belgrade casino? There's a newer one now, deeper, quieter, built beneath an abandoned parking garage in Mitrovica. It has no cameras, only one keypad, and 3 lights, red, yellow, and a blue, that only turns on when someone enters with the right heartbeat. It sounds impossible, and maybe it is. But that's the thing with Naser. You never know where the truth ends and the theater begins. Many people still think he kept cash in that vault. But insiders whisper that it held only documents, photocopies of real estate transfers, signed letters, a few digital backups of conversations long deleted. So what do you think? Was it a treasury or a threat made tangible? One evening, he meets a man from the Albanian north, a quiet trafficker who never smiles and believes numbers are holy. They eat dinner in a candlelit room, sharing cold rice and lamb. Fear, the man says, is best served with familiarity. Naser nods. Fear is a tool, but it gets dull if used too often. By now, Naser has begun to move beyond operations. He's managing perception. He doesn't need to commit crimes anymore, only to suggest that he might, if provoked. One police official in Bosnia says, "We never saw him do anything, but when his name came up, we closed the file, out of courtesy." At an upscale bar in Tirana, a local journalist makes the mistake of asking questions, publicly. 3 nights later, she receives a bouquet of flowers with a card that reads, "Thank you for your curiosity. We've forwarded it to someone more appropriate." She never writes about Naser again. The message wasn't in the flowers. It was in the silence that followed. And still, every Sunday, The ritual. 3 newspapers, 1 espresso, 1 hour of absolute stillness by the suite window. That's when he plans, not just routes and partnerships, but exits. He begins purchasing properties under new identities, 1 in Dubai, 1 in Malaysia, a vineyard in southern Spain. He's not fleeing, he's archiving. He tells his legal advisor, "One day, they'll close every road I've built, but not every door I've left open." His son Elvis notices the change. "You're preparing to disappear," he says one night softly. Naser smiles. "No, I'm preparing to be forgotten properly. That's the plan. Not to die in headlines, but to vanish like a name from an old receipt. Because for Naser, real legacy isn't memory. It's absence so perfect, no one knows what's missing. The casino floor smells of liquor, cigarette ash, and too much ambition. Naser stands behind a curtain, half watching a high-stakes poker table where 3 men are pretending not to sweat. He's not here to play, he's here to listen. Every chip tells a story. Every hesitation a secret. And the more he listens, the clearer the game behind the game becomes. One of the players owes him. Not directly, of course, but through a debt that's been folded and refolded over so many hands, it no longer resembles what it once was. Naser likes it that way. The casino has become more than a business. It's a barometer. When the mood shifts on the floor, when certain players stop showing up, when drinks go untouched, that's when Naser knows to check his ledgers. Because the money never lies, people do. And right now, someone's lying. He exits the viewing area and moves silently through the back hallway to the surveillance room. The security chief, a man with 1 good eye and a dozen enemies, greets him with a nervous nod. "Watch table 7, Naser says without looking. The screen flickers. 1 man, slick suit, twitchy fingers, is dealing too carefully. Naser watches for 2 minutes, then turns away. "Let him win tonight," he says. "Then make sure his car breaks down just outside the city. That'll give him time to think. He doesn't need to punish. He just needs people to notice the pause." Many people still think Naser ran his casinos like a mob boss, loud, brutal, flashy. But the truth is, he ran them like temples. So, what do you think? Was it gambling or a controlled environment for studying desperation? Do you remember the old hotel on the Montenegrin coast, the one with no mailbox? It's been sold, quietly, transferred to a holding company registered in the British Virgin Islands, then back to an associate in Dubai. But inside it hasn't changed. Still the same silence. Still the same security. Still the same back room where Naser occasionally hosts men who've run out of places to hide. One of them, a panicked Italian intermediary, begs for help escaping an indictment. Naser listens, nods politely, then says, "You should have panicked sooner." He offers him a drink and nothing else. The man leaves empty-handed but still breathing. And that's a kindness. Naser's power by now isn't in his reach, it's in his refusal. Refusal to explain. Refusal to rush. Refusal to retaliate when provoked, which in itself becomes a form of pressure. Even law enforcement begins to hesitate. Files go missing. Witnesses withdraw. Judges recuse themselves from trials they haven't even been assigned to yet. Historical fact. Throughout the 2010s, organized crime cases across the Balkans frequently collapsed due to lack of evidence, though whispers of pressure, bribes, and intimidation often floated beneath the surface. In Naser's case, the files don't just collapse, they evaporate. A regional police commander once joked, "We couldn't even find fingerprints. It's like the man holds a degree in wind." Meanwhile, back in Sarajevo, his influence becomes cultural. He sponsors a jazz festival, funds a scholarship program for young engineers, donates to the renovation of a war-damaged museum wing. Anonymously, of course, though everyone knows. He doesn't do it for press. He does it to ensure the city owes him something it can't quantify, because if a city sings your name in silence, it can't shout it in court. Elvis, now wiser and more controlled, begins managing operations with real precision. He still doesn't love the business, but he finally understands it. One night, after a flawless logistics run through Bulgaria, he receives a simple message from his father. "You're finally late for nothing." It's the closest thing to affection Naser's ever sent. Do you remember the vault beneath Mitrovica? It's been cleaned out, not abandoned, reset. In its place now are 5 safes, each containing only one item: a key with no label, a watch set to Istanbul time, a flash drive with no marking, a child's drawing of a house by the sea, and a letter sealed with wax addressed only to the next. That's not a vault, that's a map, a whisper across decades. And Naser knows it may outlive him. He's begun writing less, meeting less, speaking even less, because when you reach the summit, the climb is over, but the silence echoes louder. And Naser Kelmendi has always been more fluent in silence than any language written in ink. If you walk past the Grand Hotel Europa at just the right hour, close to 3 a.m., when the wind sweeps cigarette butts and whispered regrets down the empty Sarajevo streets, you might catch a glimpse of a black car idling under the lamp that never quite works. The engine purrs like it's listening. The driver doesn't check his phone, and every so often, a figure exits the side door of the hotel, coat buttoned just so, head slightly lowered. Not in shame, but in calibration. It's Naser. He rides at night now. Short drives, looping through the old Ottoman quarters, the post-war concrete blocks, the bridges with names no one remembers. Not because he needs to check anything, but because stillness to him is a sign that something's hiding. He watches for patterns. The lit window at the same flat every Tuesday. The absence of a beggar he used to see. The billboard that changes too fast. He doesn't speak, he registers. Back at the hotel, the suite with no number remains untouched during the day. At night, though, it comes alive with the quietest activity. A folded newspaper, an envelope sealed in red wax, a phone that rings once and never again. Naser has narrowed his circle, not out of fear, but refinement. He doesn't need many people now. He needs the right 3. And one of those 3 just made a mistake. A financial hiccup in Montenegro. A payment processed too soon. A traceable trail where there shouldn't have been one. Naser doesn't punish him. He invites him for tea. The man arrives shaking. He expects shouting, exile, maybe worse. Instead, Naser pours 2 cups, offers honey, asks about the man's daughter. Then, without accusation, he says, "Next time you get excited, wait a day. The world doesn't move because you want it to. No threats, just calibration." And it works. Historical fact. One of the biggest challenges in transnational crime networks is overambition by lieutenants. Hasty moves, ego-driven decisions, poorly timed transfers. Naser avoids this by cultivating restraint, like a gardener trimming the bloom before it wilts. Do you remember that courier who was late at the butcher shop? He now manages a customs firm in North Macedonia. Still terrified of being 5 minutes behind, many people still think Naser succeeded by being everywhere. But the truth is, he succeeded by being just where he needed to be, and never more. So what do you think? Was he a strategist? Or simply a man who learned how to breathe at the right tempo? One afternoon, while inspecting a warehouse outside Podujevo, Naser notices a dog sleeping in the doorway. Trucks are idling. Workers are too quiet. He kneels, feeds the dog part of his lunch, then walks the perimeter himself. Finds a new tire track, unregistered, fresh. "Someone's sniffing," he says to his driver later. Within hours, the entire facility is scrubbed. The staff rotated. The logs burned. The trucks rerouted. No panic, just motion. He begins carrying fewer phones. In fact, none. He communicates now via pattern. If the lights are on in the suite before sunset, it means cancel the meeting. If a red tie is worn during a charity event, it means proceed. His world has become pure implication. He meets a new ally through a chess game, a Serb named Luka, with an eye for border patrol schedules and a love for Sicilian openings. Their game is slow. It takes 4 hours. By the end, no deal is spoken, but 3 joint ventures are understood. Luka never asks how he lost, he knows. Naser writes something that night in his notebook. Some men understand without being told. They're the only ones worth trusting. Elvis, now managing multiple fronts, starts noticing new behavior in his father. Fewer instructions, longer pauses, occasional questions like, if you had to vanish, where would you start from? It isn't morbid, it's architectural. Because for Naser, an exit is not an escape, it's a design. He begins liquidating parts of the empire, sells a string of hotels in Kosovo, transfers 2 shipping licenses to a former rival's son, makes 3 people very rich, very quietly. Each move cloaked as generosity. But in truth, they're closures, doors being pulled shut on the past. And still, every Sunday, the ritual remains. Espresso, newspapers, an hour of silence. Do you remember the drawing of the house by the sea, locked in the vault? He's begun searching for a real one to match it. Not to live in, just to leave unlocked. Because one day, someone might need to arrive somewhere and find the door open. And that, to Naser, would be the purest legacy. Rain taps softly on the windows of the suite without a number. It's nearly midnight, and Sarajevo hums below, traffic thinning, shop lights flickering, the kind of quiet that feels deliberate. Naser is seated at his desk, reading a document he's already memorized. It's a shipping manifest that will never reach a port, stamped with signatures that belong to men who no longer remember signing. He isn't reading it for information, he's reading it for rhythm, because by now, everything in his life has a cadence. Arrivals, disappearances, conversations, even his absences. Tonight he's expecting no one, which means someone will come. He turns to the far wall, where the air conditioning hums just loud enough to remind him he's still breathing. On the desk, 1 cup of tea, 1 pair of glasses he doesn't need, and 1 old photo. A younger Naser, standing in front of a Mercedes, half a smile, both hands empty. The photo isn't there to remind him who he was. It's to remind him how little he's ever shown. Do you remember the woman at the Tirana Gala who asked if he was dangerous? There have been more like her lately. Journalists, activists, even a podcaster who nearly got close. But each time, the answer is the same. A nod, a smile, a gentle redirect. He doesn't deny, he just delays. Because the moment you define a man like Naser, you give him shape, and shape can be targeted. Instead, he remains ambient, present only where needed, traceable only when permitted. Historical fact. In high-level criminal operations, the most successful figures often remain entirely off-grid, not just legally, but narratively. They control the story being told about them, using myth as a defense. And Naser, he's become his own camouflage. So what do you think? Was he hiding? Or did he simply learn that truth fades slower than lies? Outside Sarajevo, in the hills above Vogostia, there's a small cottage. Ordinary, peeling paint. No satellite dish. Inside lives an old man who once led a customs unit feared by smugglers across 3 borders. He now spends his mornings drinking weak coffee and his evenings watching the road. Why? Because once Naser sent him a letter. Just 1 sentence. Some things are better seen from a distance. The letter came with no signature, but it didn't need one. That's how Naser handles threats. Not by crushing them, by relocating their attention. His operations these days are increasingly abstract. Less about goods, more about position. One day, a Turkish import firm changes hands without ever being listed for sale. The next, a Romanian telecom license is granted to an unfamiliar name with a familiar address. Naser's fingerprints are nowhere, but his breath is on the glass. Even Elvis struggles to keep up. "Are we still moving cargo?" he asks one morning. "We're moving doubt," Naser replies. "It weighs less, but travels further. That's the evolution, from smuggler to specter. And yet, not everything changes." The Grand Hotel Europa still runs under his rhythm. The suite remains untouched by daylight, and the vault beneath Mitrovica still hums with quiet contingency. One man, an accountant from Vienna, visits him in the dead of winter. He wants to transition the funds. Naser listens, then hands him an envelope with 2 words written inside. "Not yet." The accountant leaves shaken, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. "Do you remember the 3 lights in the vault? Red, yellow, blue?" The blue's been flickering lately. A sensor glitch? Possibly. A signal? Probably, because Naser never lets a system degrade without reason. He begins preparing small gifts. Not lavish, not personal, just items wrapped in plain brown paper, each tagged with a year and a single initial. Some are mailed, some are never sent, some are buried. He tells no one why. But the pattern is clear. It's not distribution, it's seeding. Legacy, after all, isn't what you leave behind. It's what grows after you've left. And still, each Sunday, the same espresso, the same folded paper, the same hour of silence. Only now, he's added a new ritual. At the very end, he places one finger over the rim of the teacup, pauses, and whispers something no one hears. Not a prayer, not a confession, just punctuation. There's a new rhythm to the quiet now. Not the stillness of hiding, but the hush of closing ceremonies. Naser walks slower, not because his body demands it, but because the world does. The game has sped up without his permission. Faster deals, louder men, cheaper loyalties. He is in a sense out of style, and yet he's never been more dangerous, because now he's untethered. No borders, no debts, no need to prove, to climb, to collect. Only the need to finalize. Do you remember the house by the sea from the drawing in the vault? It's been found, not bought, claimed. Nestled in southern Albania, past a village too small for a police station and too old for tourists, sits a crumbling white home with one blue shutter and a lemon tree that still bears fruit. He sends a man to quietly rebuild it. No upgrades, no cameras, just restoration. Why? Because sometimes power needs a past, a place to pretend it once felt small. Meanwhile, back in Sarajevo, a new police commissioner is making headlines. He's young, idealistic, and utterly unaware that he's 3 meetings away from shaking hands with someone Naser shook hands with 10 years ago. That's how deep it goes. Historical fact. Modern Balkan criminal networks are often described as invisible governments, interlaced through legal, cultural, and financial systems in ways that make extraction nearly impossible. Naser doesn't run that government, but he whispers in its walls. He watches the commissioners rise with mild curiosity. No threats, no countermoves, just observation. Because the game now isn't survival, it's curation. His operations are almost entirely silent. The logistics wing runs itself, tied to ports he hasn't visited in years. The casinos still hum, though now under different names, newer logos. His name appears less frequently in the rumors. Instead, people refer to the old system, or the silent years, and he lets them, because the less they say his name, the more they remember it. One night, he receives a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside, a list of 5 names, all familiar, and one question scribbled at the bottom. Which one do you still trust? He burns the letter, slowly, not out of fear, but reverence. Some questions aren't answered. They're preserved. Elvis notices the change. The calls are shorter, the instructions fewer. His father seems lighter. He asks over coffee, "Are we preparing for something?" Naser replies, "We're always preparing, but now we're also releasing." It's a subtle but final shift. From construction to deconstruction. The vault? It's no longer protected. In fact, it's being phased out. The contents redistributed. The blue light has stopped flickering, not because it's been fixed, but because its message was received. You see, Naser never needed monuments. He only needed mechanisms. And now, those mechanisms are being retired. He begins sending envelopes, one to an old customs officer in Macedonia, another to a retired banker in Sofia. Each contains a memory, a photo, a ticket stub, a contract they forgot they signed. He doesn't want repayment. He wants recognition, not public, not loud, just a nod in the dark. Do you remember the man in the casino who counted cards and lost on purpose? Naser sends him a pair of gloves with a card. "You always had the better hand." The man never replies, but Naser knows it made its way. Many people still think legacy is written in ink, but Naser knows better. Legacy is written in silence, in the way someone hesitates before saying your name, in the way others choose not to say it at all. So what do you think? Do ghosts fade, or do they simply become part of the architecture? One Sunday, the ritual breaks. No expresso, no newspapers. Just a chair, a closed curtain, and Naser, still as a painting. He's not sick, he's not in danger. He's just resting, like a man who's laid every card on the table, and finally, has no more hands to play. The city doesn't notice when he stops attending meetings, not because they've stopped needing him, but because his presence was never about being seen. Naser begins to remove himself from the narrative like a careful editor deleting only the commas. He doesn't vanish all at once. He drifts, a figure receding into the architecture he helped build. He closes 3 companies in the span of a week. No press release, no scandal. Just a quiet series of filings, all done by a woman in Vienna who once told him he reminded her of her father. Stern, precise, and impossible to lie to. One by one, the pieces return to the board, not to play, to be played. Because by now, Naser isn't interested in moves. He's interested in watching the game continue without him, and wondering how long it takes before someone realizes he's no longer at the table. Do you remember the fake diamonds from Pristina? He sends a pouch to an old rival. No note, no signature. Just a single gem, placed carefully in an envelope marked, "For your next mistake." The rival never responds, but changes his security detail within 48 hours. That's the kind of punctuation Naser prefers. Meanwhile, Elvis is rising, sharper, calmer. He stopped mimicking his father and started interpreting him. Not what would Naser do, but why did he do it that way? Naser notices. He says nothing. But he does remove Elvis from one shell company and insert him into another, deeper one that owns nothing and influences everything. Legacy isn't declared, it's delegated. Historical fact. Across the Balkans, leadership transfers within syndicates rarely follow clean generational lines. Power is often shared in fragments, trust, territory, silence, until the next layer emerges. Naser doesn't crown Elvis. He merely begins stepping backward. He visits the house by the sea once, alone, no guards, no drivers, just him and the wind. He sits on the stone porch, lemon blossoms drifting in lazy circles. There's a rusted tin cup on the windowsill, and a note tucked under it. It reads, "This place owes nothing to anyone." He stays 3 days, speaks to no one, then leaves, locking the door from the outside and placing the key under the threshold, exactly where a child would look first. So what do you think? Was it retirement or just intermission? The Grand Hotel Europa now runs itself. The suite without a number still exists, but the candle on the desk hasn't been lit in weeks. People still lower their voices when they walk past it. In Montenegro, the villa remains intact, though the staff has been reduced to 2. The gardener trims even the hedges that no longer grow. The chef still prepares dinner, whether anyone eats it or not, because absence, when cultivated correctly, becomes ritual. Do you remember the chess player from Serbia, Luka? He receives a handwritten note one morning. A night is only dangerous when forgotten. He doesn't need to know who sent it. He already knows what it means. Naser now spends his time writing. Not memos, not plans, but accounts. Not for publication, for preservation. A ledger of gestures, a diary of absences, a memory palace with velvet doors. He files them in numbered folders, none labeled. The order doesn't matter. The act does. And one day, while reviewing a document about a transport route he no longer owns, he smiles, because the new operator is someone he never trained, never met. But the way the form is filed, the subtle phrasing, the redundant signature, the paper slightly scented with lavender, he knows someone's following his rhythm, and that, more than inheritance, is immortality. He folds the document, places it in a drawer, closes it softly, because the end of a reign doesn't come with thunder. It comes with silence. No one questions. The rain comes softly, and for once, Naser doesn't reach for the window. He simply sits, back against the leather of a chair no one else uses, eyes closed, listening to the rhythm of the city washing itself clean. It's late, though that no longer matters. Time, like territory, is something he's slowly returned to the world, one by one. The last of the shell companies has been emptied, not dissolved, just drained. They'll stay there, hollow and harmless, like forgotten wells in an abandoned village. Elvis runs the day-to-day now. He no longer asks questions. And Naser? He's unlearning. The names, the habits, the hidden doors. He's letting go, piece by piece, like dust slipping through the spaces between fingers that used to grip too tightly. Even the Sunday ritual has softened. Now it's just warm tea, no newspapers. The silence is enough. Do you remember the vault beneath Mitrovica? It's been sealed, not destroyed, not booby-trapped, just left alone. The blue light above the door no longer glows, but if you stand close enough, you'll still hear it hum, like an old machine that doesn't know it's retired. The house by the sea, still standing. No security, no schedule. One morning, a child wandered in and found nothing but a bowl of lemons on the counter and a photograph of a man standing in front of a car, eyes half closed against the sun. She left it as she found it, because even children know not to disturb certain kinds of peace. Naser now walks mostly at night, down alleyways he used to avoid, past stores that once paid protection, now closed or repainted. No one recognizes him. And that's the point. He's become part of the city's furniture, familiar in shape, forgotten in name. One evening, outside a train station, a young man bumps into him, apologizes, rushes off. Naser steadies himself, smiles. It's not the insult that matters. It's the reminder he's no longer being looked for. Many people still think ghosts linger because they're trapped. But maybe, just maybe, they stay because they chose not to leave completely. So what do you think? Was Naser ever truly here? Or did he only exist in the pauses between other men's stories? He leaves one last envelope on the desk of the suite with no number, no name on it, no seal, just a blank page inside. Because not all legacies are meant to be written down. Some are meant to fade quietly, behind curtains no one dares open. And so he fades. The city breathes. The empire slumbers. The clock unwinds. And in a room lit only by memory, a candle never lit again slowly forgets it was ever meant to burn. The silence inside the villa near Budva is the kind that listens back. It's early spring, and the sea outside is still too cold for swimmers. But Naser isn't here for leisure. He's waiting for a man from Istanbul, one who once moved oil barrels through war zones disguised as church donations. But the man is late, and Naser, as we know, measures time like a surgeon, precisely, and with little tolerance for waste. He paces slowly across the tiled floors, hands behind his back, coat still buttoned. The security cameras are off, not because he trusts his guest, but because he doesn't need footage of what's about to be said. When the man finally arrives, huffing with apologies and cologne, Naser offers him water. No smile, no chair. The man understands. He sits without being invited and gets to the point. A route, Turkey to Albania via Greece, needs new protection. Local contacts are unreliable. The Turkish mob is shifting priorities. Naser listens unmoved. "You're late," he says after 10 minutes of proposals. "Not just to this meeting, to the moment. You're asking me to fix yesterday's problem." The man stammers, offers a higher cut, drops a name. Naser raises a hand. "If you mention one more name I don't already respect, I'll have to unlearn yours." That ends the discussion. And still, Naser offers him dinner. A slow one. Fish, olives, quiet jazz. The message is clear. The refusal was business, not personal. But the door, once open, is now closed. Historical fact. In the 2010s, as Turkish criminal syndicates shifted toward international finance and cybercrime, their Balkan roots became strained. Many long-time alliances fractured as digital profits outpaced the reliability of physical smuggling. Naser saw it coming. He didn't adapt his empire to tech. He adapted it to invisibility. Where others built websites, he built doubt. So, what do you think? Was Naser old-fashioned? Or just fluent in a language that never needed updating? Back in Sarajevo, Elvis receives a package. No sender, just a simple wooden box. Inside, a Turkish tea glass, cracked clean down the middle, and a note. He blinked. That's Naser's way of saying the Istanbul contact folded, and that the danger has passed. These days, father and son speak less often. Not out of distance, but synchronization. Elvis is handling more than logistics now. He's managing people, narrative, atmosphere. At a private dinner with foreign investors, one of them asks, "So what exactly does your organization do?" Elvis smiles gently and replies, "We ensure things arrive, and things stay forgotten." Not a lie, not quite. Back at the villa, Naser takes long walks down the cliffs. He wears plain shoes now, leaves his phone inside, watches the sea like it might eventually answer a question he hasn't dared ask. Sometimes he stops and speaks to no one. Just a murmur in the salt air, a test to see if echoes still return to him. Do you remember the silence of his first car ride through the border mountains? This feels like that again. Motion without chase, stillness without hiding. The Turkish alliance was once essential. Now it's just a thread being snipped, softly, without ceremony, because Naser doesn't burn bridges. He lets them sink on their own. The Albanian pipeline doesn't appear on maps. It hums along old goat paths, village lanes, mountain gaps only known to men who don't believe in street names. Naser's had his eye on it for years. Not for drugs, though plenty move through it. Not for weapons, though the soil is laced with rusted metal and broken promises. No, he watches it because it behaves like something alive. There's an elegance to it. No central control, no single boss. Just cousins, couriers, and codes passed down in bread deliveries and wedding toasts. And now it's whispering again. A new faction has begun inserting itself. Younger men, flashier, less patient. They think speed equals power. They're wrong. Naser hears about it from a shepherd. Yes, a shepherd. The man drops a note wrapped in plastic into a fence post near Kuki's. It finds its way to a boy. The boy takes it to a woman who sells imported soap. She passes it to a truck driver. He slides it beneath a fuel tank. 3 days later, it lands on Naser's desk in Sarajevo. 7 hands, 4 languages, 1 sentence. There are boys pretending to be doors. Naser reads it once, sips his tea, then circles one name. He doesn't send threats, he sends questions. A man from fear receives a plain envelope. How many mirrors do you break before you realize they're watching back? The man steps down the next day. No one replaces him. Because in that pipeline, fear doesn't need volume. It needs history, historical fact. Albania's northern region, especially in areas like Tropoja and Kukës, became key corridors for organized trafficking in the early 2000s. The routes were less controlled by hierarchical cartels and more by interwoven clans, resilient, secretive, and bound by honor. Naser never controlled them. He harmonized with them. So what do you think? Was he a king? Or just a man who learned how to kneel without lowering his head? Elvis, watching from Belgrade, begins to question whether they should hold on to the Albanian connection at all. It's too volatile, he says. Too many favors, too few rules. Naser listens, then replies, favors are rules. They just dress better. Still, he lets Elvis start winding down some of the routes, quietly. No shutdowns. Just slowing the rhythm until the corridor forgets it was ever busy. Do you remember the mechanic who once worked customs papers like poetry? He now lives in Durrës, retired, tending to a lemon grove. Naser sends him a basket of books and a clock with no hands. The man doesn't respond. But he rewires his radio antenna to pick up frequencies from Sarajevo, just in case. Because even in retirement, Naser's presence pulls at the air. He walks now with more caution, not fear. Not even paranoia, just a sense of final edits. The Albanian network was always a wild thing, beautiful in motion, reckless in hunger, and now, as it contracts, he watches it not with regret, but with gratitude. Not everything has to be possessed to be useful. Sometimes, the best empire is the one that lets itself be outgrown. Even before he steps onto the plaza, people know he's coming. Not by face, not by name, by timing. The doorman at the Hotel Europa adjusts his tie. The florist across the street delays closing. A waiter, halfway through cleaning his last glass, leaves one untouched on the counter, just in case, and then he appears. Silken suit, scarf loose, not for warmth, but to soften the lines of his silhouette. His gait is measured, like he's not walking through the world, but balancing it. Naser, the man who doesn't need an entourage because every wall in the city has memorized his outline. He enters the hotel, nods once to no one in particular, ascends in a private lift that doesn't exist on the directory. The suite is untouched, as always. 1 chair, 1 desk, 1 city wrapped in dusk through the window. This is where he waits, not for visitors, but for echoes. Tonight, he's not reviewing operations or old debts. He's preparing for his next move, an appearance. He's been invited to a quiet dinner with a Serbian financier. Not a criminal. Not yet, but on the cusp. The kind of man who wears watches he can't pronounce and believes Naser is a myth from his father's era. Perfect, because when myths walk into candlelight, they don't explain themselves. They correct assumptions. Historical fact. In the late 2010s, a shift occurred in Balkan underworld dynamics. Less violence, more investment. Organized crime moved into clean industries, energy, telecoms, real estate. Criminals became shareholders, influencers, and political donors. Naser, who never liked titles, became the thing everyone else wanted to imitate. The businessman you couldn't trace, the ghost you couldn't invite, the silence that signed checks. At the dinner, he says little, lets the financier boast. When the man finally asks, "What do you do?" Naser replies, "I finish things that never needed to begin." No follow-up question. Just a swallowing of pride, like someone tasting a dish too seasoned for their tongue. Later, in the car, Naser speaks to his driver for the first time all day. He'll try to reach out again in a week. The driver nods. Should I schedule? No, Naser says. Let him wonder if the dinner was real. So what do you think? Was he playing games, or simply setting the table for consequences? Back at the suite, he opens a small box. Inside, a single cufflink from a suit he no longer owns, a folded map of Marseille, and a note that reads, "The glass was cracked before I poured." A memory, a message, a warning, all three. Elvis finds out later about the meeting, gets annoyed. You said we were done with appearances. We are, Naser says. But some shadows still need reminding where the light comes from. He's not angry, he's exact. There's a difference. In Belgrade, the financier signs a lease on a waterfront property the following week. It's overpriced, under-patrolled, exactly where Naser wanted him. Because sometimes empire isn't about holding land, it's about directing footsteps. And Naser, he's still the architect of walking paths. Even now, especially now, in a courtroom in Sarajevo, the air is thick with microphones and misplaced optimism. A new prosecutor stands at the podium, young, fervent, carrying a binder that trembles in his hands like it knows what it's about to contain. Naser isn't there. Of course he isn't. The man on trial is one of his old associates, distant, faintly remembered, like a second cousin in a dream. The charges are vague, paper-thin: tax evasion, licensing fraud, whispered ties to unlicensed logistics. But the word Kelmendi hovers between sentences like a ghost wearing no shoes. Everyone in the room feels it. No one dares say it. The judge leans back, unimpressed. The defense lawyer smiles too much. And the courtroom clock ticks like it's trying to keep up with a tempo only Naser knows. Outside, journalists rehearse their headlines. The empire on trial, the shadow of Sarajevo, the ghost, and the gavel. None of them will run, because halfway through the hearing, a quiet document is submitted. A notarized lease agreement showing that the accused man was renting his office from a company owned by a Swedish pension fund. Not Naser, not his shell companies. Just 1,000 tiny steps removed. Legal chains snapped by distance. Historical fact: by the late 2010s, Balkan courts saw a dramatic rise in organized crime cases that never reached conviction. International pressure forced prosecutions, but the criminal structures had evolved faster than the legal frameworks chasing them. And Naser? He was already playing a different game entirely. He watches the trial from a room without windows. Not for amusement, not for fear, but for verification. It ends predictably in collapse. Not with a bang, but with a bureaucratic shrug. The man walks free. The prosecutor is reassigned. The case file is archived under a name no one will search again. Elvis is furious. Not because they won, but because they had to. We shouldn't even be close enough to be questioned, he says. Naser replies, then we've come full circle. Because now the only threat is nostalgia. It's not arrogance, it's architecture. Do you remember the vault's 5 items? That sealed letter marked the next? Naser hasn't opened it. It's not for him. But lately, he started writing its companion. A second envelope. Same wax seal. A different destination. He places it in a locked drawer beneath the desk in the suite without a number. Not as a failsafe, as a mirror. Because legacy isn't just what survives, it's what reflects. So, what do you think? Was this trial the end of something, or just proof that nothing ever really ends when it's designed to fade? That night, Naser walks alone along the Miljacka River. The city feels familiar, but not possessive. Like a song you once loved playing quietly from another room. A man approaches him, nervous, young. I know who you are, he says. Naser looks at him calmly. No, he replies. You know who I was. The man says nothing more, just steps aside, and Naser walks on. Because the past, when curated carefully, becomes a coat you no longer need to wear. The reporters call him the Balkan Gatsby. It's a lazy headline, written by someone who never met him, never understood that opulence was never Naser's game. Not really. He didn't care about chandeliers or tailored carpets. He cared about placement, about what things meant when you put them in certain rooms, at certain angles, under certain lights. But the nickname sticks. It shows up in a French documentary with a half-animated reenactment, in an American podcast where his name is mispronounced 6 times, and in a Serbian op-ed that dares to ask, did we need him more than we feared him? Naser doesn't comment, because that's the power of myth. When it talks, you don't answer. You listen. Back in Sarajevo, the Grand Hotel Europa begins renovations again. This time, they're purely cosmetic. The lobby is redone, the bar updated. The old lift, once his private path, now opens to all guests, though no one uses it. It hums like a mausoleum. Elvis oversees the construction, watching as each piece of old-world charm is gently removed. "You're sure about this?" he asks his father. Naser doesn't reply. He simply watches the workers peel away a wallpaper layer to reveal a faded signature scrawled in pencil beneath. EK 2004. He lets it stay, because some ghosts belong in the wallpaper. Historical fact. In modern, organized crime histories, figures like Naser are rarely remembered by their direct actions, but by their shape. The way systems flexed around them, the way fear and respect blurred, the way cities bent in their presence and never quite straightened after. Now, even journalists tread carefully. One requests an interview. The reply arrives in the form of a tea tin. No words, just an empty, ornate tin with a single lemon seed at the bottom. The message is clear. Plant your own story. So what do you think? Did Naser become untouchable because of what he did, or because of what others feared they couldn't prove? Meanwhile, in a high-rise office in Skopje, an insurance executive receives a bouquet of white orchids. No card, no known sender. He cancels his plan to testify the next morning. Later, he tells a friend, it wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. And in Montenegro, a yacht purchase is quietly reversed. In Tirana, a construction permit disappears. In Brussels, a task force closes with no announcement. Nothing dramatic, just a collective exhale. Elvis begins to understand the deeper mechanics now. He's not just holding operations. He's holding narratives. And narratives don't need fuel. They need tension. One evening, he finds his father sitting in the garden of their Sarajevo home, clipping leaves from a basil plant. "You know," Elvis says, "they're starting to call me by your name." Naser doesn't look up. "Then be careful," he says, "because that name carries more expectations than instructions." It's the closest he'll come to saying goodbye. "Do you remember the mechanic turned lemon grove tender in Duras?" He sends a single lemon back, shipped in a wooden box, with a napkin and a smiley face drawn in pencil. It arrives with no customs delay, because even borders still tip their hat to Naser. North Kosovo is quieter now, but the tension lingers like smoke that won't quite clear. The checkpoints are still there, manned by tired soldiers with tired eyes, but the whispered stories have shifted. No longer just about smuggling or border crossings, but about ghosts who walk the hills in tailored suits. Naser's influence here has always been subtle. Not a conqueror with guns, but a conductor of currents. A man who lets the rivers run where they want, but nudges the tides just enough to avoid floods. He arrives in Mitrovica one cool morning, stepping off a train with no luggage and no entourage. The market stalls are alive with morning chatter and the scent of fresh bread. He walks through without hurry, nodding at vendors who pretend not to notice. There's a bakery with cracked tiles where the owner still remembers the first time Naser paid extra to feed a group of children during winter. The owner nods in recognition, but says nothing. Historical fact. Northern Kosovo has long been a complex patchwork of influence, with informal economies thriving under fragile peace agreements and contested governance. Naser's presence here was less about control and more about containment. He meets a local contact in a cafe with peeling paint and flickering neon. They speak softly, exchanging numbers and names carefully. There's talk of new routes, new alliances, old grudges thawing just enough to allow passage. But Naser knows better than to trust warm words. He watches for pauses, for shifts in posture, for the slightest flicker of hesitation. Many people still think northern Kosovo is a battleground of rival clans, but Naser treats it like a chessboard, each pawn valuable, but only when it moves exactly as intended. So what do you think? Was he a warrior or a grandmaster cloaked in shadow? Later that evening, as dusk settles, Naser walks alone toward the riverbank. The water flows steady, indifferent. He takes out a small notebook and jots a few words. Balance is not stasis. It is motion in harmony. His phone buzzes, an encrypted message from Elvis. New developments, meeting at midnight. Naser folds the note, pockets the notebook, and disappears into the twilight. Because even legends have to move carefully in the dark. Casinos have changed. No longer just rooms with flashing lights and clinking chips. They've evolved into digital fortresses where currencies float unseen and fortunes flicker in lines of code. Naser watches this shift from a distance, intrigued but cautious. He doesn't rush to embrace the new. Instead, he studies it, learning its rhythms, its vulnerabilities, its promises. In a quiet room in Sarajevo, he sits before an iPad, scrolling through crypto wallets and blockchain ledgers with the same calm precision he once gave to handwritten manifests and whispered deals. He's not a gambler anymore. He's a steward of transformation. Historical fact. By the late 2010s, cryptocurrency and digital assets became a growing frontier for money laundering and underground economies worldwide, including in the Balkans, where regulation lagged behind innovation. Naser doesn't jump in blindly. He builds a network of trusted operators, tech-savvy men and women who understand that real power lies in controlling information flow, not just physical goods. He diversifies. Some wallets are encrypted beyond recovery. Others serve as decoys, tracing paths that lead nowhere. Many people still think Naser was stuck in the past, a relic of smoky rooms and heavy suits. But in truth, he was reinventing himself, quietly, methodically, invisibly. So what do you think? Was this the twilight of a dawn or the dawn of a new empire? His son Elvis is more involved than ever, managing not only logistics, but cybersecurity teams and legal fronts. Old school methods won't cut it anymore, Elvis says during a briefing. Naser nods. Then we evolve or we fade. He begins training his inner circle on encryption, anonymous transactions, and dark web navigation. The old courier routes become digital pipelines. The Grand Hotel Europa now hosts encrypted conferences behind closed doors, where spoken words are few but codes fly fast. And yet, amidst the virtual shadows, Naser remains grounded. He still enjoys the feel of paper in his hands, the weight of a sealed envelope, the quiet power of a well-timed nod. Because in a world that's becoming increasingly intangible, some things, like patience and silence, are the heaviest currencies of all. The marble halls of his properties gleam, yet few footsteps echo there anymore. These palaces, once symbols of unchecked power, now stand like quiet witnesses to a bygone era. Naser doesn't visit them often. When he does, it's with a lightness unexpected in a man who once carried the weight of kingdoms on his shoulders. He walks slowly through empty corridors, touches the cool glass of windows overlooking cities that never sleep, yet seem to forget his presence. He isn't nostalgic, just reflective. Historical fact. Many former strongholds of Balkan crime lords have been sold, repurposed, or abandoned in recent years As new generations shift away from old displays of wealth toward digital anonymity, he understands the impermanence of physical monuments. Legacy, he's learned, isn't measured in stone or steel, but in influence that outlives structures. His enemies whisper that Naser's empire is crumbling. His allies fear the silence will soon swallow him. But he knows better. Power isn't loud, it's patient. It waits in the cracks, in the spaces between words, in the things never said. Many people still think empires fall with a roar, but some disappear in a whisper. So, what do you think? Did Naser's legacy crumble, or did it evolve into something unseen, yet unshakable? In the late hours, he meets with a handful of old allies, men who once shared battles in silence, now strangers connected by memory and unspoken understanding. They drink black coffee, stronger than their conversation. One man asks, "What now?" Naser looks at the city lights, distant and steady. Now, he says, we become part of the background, because true power, he's learned, doesn't seek the spotlight. It creates the shadows. Whispers swirl around the city, about hidden tunnels beneath Sarajevo, secret vaults with no known keys, and men who vanish without footprints. Some say Naser's empire is built on secrets so deep, they might be myths. Others insist those myths are reality wrapped in shadows. One late night, a local historian finds a dusty map tucked behind a loose brick in an old building. The map shows a labyrinth of forgotten passages, connecting safe houses, border crossings, and meeting points once used by smugglers long gone. Is it proof or just folklore? Naser smiles at these rumors. He knows the truth is somewhere in between. Historical fact. Balkan cities, scarred by decades of conflict and change, have layers of forgotten infrastructure, tunnels, bunkers, and passageways that have been repurposed by many, including organized crime networks. He once walked those tunnels, not for escape, but to understand the arteries of his domain. Rumors of dead informants and secret vaults circulate quietly, adding to the aura of untouchability. Yet Naser remains silent, not out of fear, but because silence is his strongest shield. Many people still think that power is shown through violence or visibility, but Naser demonstrates that sometimes power is the art of not being seen at all. So what do you think? Was Naser a man hiding from the world, or a world hiding behind the man? In the shadows of the city, the walls remember more than people do, and some secrets Naser believes are better left buried. On a rainy evening, the Grand Hotel Europa's doors open quietly, and Naser Kelmendi steps inside alone. His suitcase is old leather, worn from years of travel, but still sturdy. His smile, faint but unyielding, holds stories no one can read. He moves through the familiar halls with the ease of a man returning home, though home has long since become a concept rather than a place. The hotel is nearly empty, the hum of the city outside softened by the rain's rhythm on the windows. He takes the private elevator to the suite without a number. Inside, the room is dim, the air thick with memories. A single candle flickers on the desk. Naser sets his suitcase down, removes a small sealed envelope, and places it carefully among a stack of others, some unopened, others worn at the edges. He sits, gazes out over the cityscape, and for the first time in decades, lets the silence settle. Not as a tool, but as a companion. He reflects on the path he's walked, the smuggling routes, the silent deals, the empires built and unbuilt in shadows and whispers. There's no regret, only understanding. Many people still think that power is measured by conquest or notoriety. But Naser knows it's measured by what you leave behind and what you choose to take with you. So what do you think? Was he a king without a crown, or a ghost who ruled the spaces between kingdoms? Outside, the rain softens to a mist. The city breathes beneath clouds that obscure the stars. Naser closes his eyes, and in that moment, the man who loved casinos, silence and control fades gently into the night, leaving behind a legacy not written in stone, but whispered on the wind. So now, as the night deepens and the rain settles softly on the city, let your breath slow and your thoughts drift. You've journeyed through quiet streets and hushed corridors, through whispered deals and unseen shadows. But this story is not about loud victories or dramatic falls. It's about the spaces in between, the moments when power is measured not by force, but by patience, not by noise, but by silence. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a calm sea, the water dark and still, reflecting only the faintest glimmers of light. There is peace here. There is rest. Let the tension melt away, the weight in your shoulders, the racing thoughts behind your eyes. Breathe deeply, slowly, knowing that some stories end not with a shout, but with a whisper, and that whisper carries the softest kind of strength. You've walked beside a man who mastered absence, who shaped worlds with silence, who built empires not of brick or blood, but of patience and shadow. Now, it's time to let that strength carry you into your own dreams. Good night. Sleep well.